And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. I'm Bill Tucker filling in for Steve tonight. Let's get down to business and get it going with the political panel. Joining us tonight, Margaret Howell, international reporter. Brad Hirschfield, president of CLAL and author of my favorite title ever, You Don't Have to Be Wrong for Me to Be Right. And Jack Burkman, radio host of Behind the Curtain with Jack Burkman and president of Burkman Associates. Folks, thanks for being here. Let's start with the most obvious place of all to start today, and that is the confirmed appointments of 3 of President Trump's cabinet. We begin with, if you don't know, Attorney General. He wants to appoint Jeff Sessions. That has been confirmed, and all 3 of these men have accepted these posts. For CIA, head of CIA, Congressman Mike Pompeo of Kansas, and for National Security Advisor, he is going with General Mike Flynn. Margaret, we'll start with you. Ladies first. Do any of these appointments surprise and or concern you?
Oh, no, I think they're all excellent choices. And in particular, Jeff Sessions. Look, he sat on Trump's National Advisory Committee well into the beginning of his, running for presidency. And I think that as a replacement for Loretta Lynch, he couldn't have found a better candidate. We're looking at someone who has 2 decades in the Senate, who is solid and well-liked by everyone across the aisle. I think that was an excellent choice. The CIA director confirmation, I don't know if I would have done that myself personally, but I'm happy with all of his selections, in particular Jeff Sessions. I will just say that.
Brad, you weigh in on this, if you will, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's interesting. The first thing that comes up with Sessions is that it's a reward for his loyalty. Now, that doesn't make Trump any different than predecessors, right, because typically people do get rewarded for loyalty. I do think that calling him a world-class legal mind is an overreach and probably wasn't smart of the president-elect. The most interesting thing is he could run into some difficulty over things he has said over the years. Yeah. But the truth is they were 30 years ago. He says he didn't say them, to be fair to him. I think the really interesting thing with Sessions is that people who like him say, oh, he never said it. People who don't want him to see him get the AG job say, of course he said it. He should never be confirmed. The truth is, if we're going to move forward together, and he is going to get confirmed because presidents' choices do get confirmed and should be confirmed, it will be really interesting for people to step back and go, isn't it interesting how what we believe about 30 years ago, with no evidence for either side, always confirms what we believe about the present? I think that's probably not the best
I will
way to
echo what Margaret said.
Go ahead, Jack.
I'll echo what Margaret said, Bill. I think they're great. I think 3 great choices. What I really see with Sessions is integrity. And that's what the Justice Department needs and hasn't had for 8 years. It's been a tough 20 years for the U.S. Justice Department, maybe even further back than that when you look at people like Janet Reno having been the longest-serving Attorney General in U.S. history. So it's been a very bad 2 decades for the Justice Department. There have been very few bright spots, but I think he's bringing integrity back. You know, the Post and the Times are running out of ways to criticize the transitions. I mean, they're throwing mud at the wall. They know they have to write critical articles. I think Trump's transition is proving to be brilliantly well organized, and I think he's off to a great start.
Yeah, I don't find anything unusual about the pace of anything that's going on. I do want to raise the question, though, and there is a legitimate concern focused on Mike Flynn, because the general has, in fact, been paid to speak in Russia. He has a company which has done consulting work for the Turkish government, not for the Kurds, but for the Turkish government. And so that whether there's much to it or not, I can't say. But Jack, are you a little concerned at all that there might be some kind of deeper tie than just being paid to do a speech in Russia?
No, not at all. And if, in fact, I'll tell you something, I'll quote Bill Clinton. If we start going down this road where we worry about those things, the only type of people that we can have in politics and public life will be the sons of millionaires and billionaires, and that's not what America should be about. Everyone who's not born wealthy needs to earn money. I think those things are just testament to his great international abilities. I don't care if he got paid by the Turks or the Russians. I mean, everybody needs to earn a living. There's no evidence that would in any way compromise his judgment. I have no problem with it.
Yeah, and Brad, actually that kind of touches on an issue that you raised talking about Sessions. There isn't the perfect person. There's not going to be anybody that we're going to pick that doesn't have some flaw, some problem. It seems like we don't want to reconcile the fact that we're talking about real people here. And is that just me,
Oh, no, it's not just you. People are always going to, identify what they like as the good and the other as the bad. I think it's ironic that we're not going to quote Bill Clinton on the legitimacy of profiteering from your political connections, which is just ironic to me. I happen to think that he's right and that Jack's point is well taken, that people do need to make a living. I think he showed up for something that's clearly a propaganda tool for the Russians, and that's the concern. But that doesn't mean he's a dishonest person.
Yeah, but see, here's where we differ. Here's where we differ, Brad. I don't bash the Clintons for...
There is one piece here on
I don't
Flynn,
bash
Bill,
the
No, let Brad make his point, Jack, and then we'll get to
There is one piece on Flynn that I think is very seriously significant, potentially at least. He is a patriot. It's interesting, he's a lifelong Democrat. His focus has been in recent years on one thing and one thing only, and that is combating radical Islam. I think he is right to do that. Where I think he is wrong is he has repeatedly said things like, Islam is not a religion, it's a political ideology masquerading as a religion. The cautionary note is here.
He's right.
For us to, no, he's not right, and that's absurd. If we flip from what is arguably apologetics for radical Islam to a failure to understand Islam, we will actually have gone from the frying pan to the fire. And however emotionally satisfying it may be, neither one is a path to building the kind of security we have to have.
Says the rabbi, Jack.
Here, a couple of things. Here's the bottom line on Islam. People say there's hundreds of millions of people who follow it, but the religion, if it is a religion, has become increasingly radicalized over the last 40 years, such that I believe a majority of people who follow it are now in the radical category. There have been drastic changes in the nature of Islam over the past few decades that we as a country cannot ignore. We can't continue to say things like, oh, we're certain that most of the people who follow it are peaceful people. We don't know that. We have to be on guard.
Actually, we do.
All of the things that are affecting our country in the way of terrorism are coming from one part of the world. They're not coming from South America. They're not coming from Latin America. They're not coming from Asia. They're not coming from Africa. They're coming from the Mideast. And there's nothing wrong with this country having a heightened scrutiny of people from that region and also of Islam itself.
Margaret, where do you weigh in on this? Do you agree with Jack, or are you somewhere in between?
Well, not to interrupt these fellows on your panel, because the discussion, I'm frankly enjoying it. I absolutely agree with Jack in this case. And just going back to, really quickly, we got off topic here. Mr. Flynn, General Flynn was in question. What the heck is wrong with doing business with Russia? I mean, when did we become, are we in the McCarthy era yet again? There's nothing wrong with that. We never questioned Hillary Clinton when she did business with the Russians. You know, recently, Nerlin was his name, his last name is escaping me, number one uranium dealer in the world, recently died last year. He was very close to the Clintons. I don't think that there's an issue with doing business globally with partners. And Trump most recently has reached across the aisle to Putin. And as somebody who's lived and worked in Moscow myself, I don't particularly see anything wrong with that. Now, to the second point of radical Islam and being able to properly vet people, look what happened in Germany this week. The German police were raiding 190 sites. We're talking about mosques, apartment buildings, offices, under the guise of, Islam, one faction of it. They were calling themselves True Religion. They were collecting knuckle dusters, knives, swords, major weaponry. They determined that over 150 of them had gone back to fight in Syria. And that should be a cautionary tale for us. Look, we're changing our immigration policy and stance, and we're the better for it because we've decided to put our country first for once. And I think that we're moving in the right direction, but at the same time, we really have to be careful because we know that Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security, has not been able to adequately vet people coming into the country that are seeking refugee status, particularly in Syria. And I think that finally we have a president that understands that and is putting the safety and security of the American people first. And frankly, my hat's off to him. This is not a discussion about.
I don't think there's any. Actually, I don't think that there's any disagreement among this panel that putting America first is great. I think Brad makes a really, really interesting point, though. It is one thing to go from complete ignorance and complete, just unabashed, it doesn't exist, radical Islam, to suddenly everybody in Islam wants to kill you. There's got to be a point somewhere in between.
Well, Bill, if I can jump in.
Well, that's not what we're saying, Bill, but...
No, Brad, go ahead. We got time. We got a minute left, Brad, and we'll come back.
We have numbers on this, and that's exactly my point. We cannot go from stupid apologetics about radical Islam to ignorance about a 1,500-year-old tradition. The fact of the matter is, nonpartisan polling from the Pew Organization and others, and Jack is certainly right about the increase in radicalization over 40 years, gives us the numbers. We know what they are. If you have about a community of 1.2 billion people globally, about 200 million of them represent what we would call a radicalized or jihadist perspective.
Yeah.
Here are the two things we now know. The vast majority of Muslims do not fall into that camp. And with that said, you have a 200 million person community that will stop at nothing to go to war with us.
All right, Brad, I'm going to
is
stop you right there. We're going to
people-
pick this up in a second. I got to cut everybody off. Nobody go away. More of this. Don't. We'll be right back.